Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a crime thriller film, The Chaser. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a pretty woman being picked up by a man. They drive to a dark alley and he parks the car. The two of them then walk off together. Morning comes and the car remains parked in the alley. A police car notices the abandoned vehicle and asks a man huddled under an umbrella if the car is his. The man, nicknamed Mr. Pimp, curses under his breath and whispers that he will kill the girl when he finds her. Mr. Pimp is actually a pimp who is currently having problems since two of his girls have mysteriously vanished. Rich in hormones though, he is now short on cash and pleads with someone on the phone to wait until he scrounges up enough money to pay him. A few moments later, his phone rings again. This time it's a customer ordering one of his prostitutes. So Mr. Pimp sends a street girl to the customer's motel room. But once inside, she discovers that there's another man hiding in the bathroom to secretly take photos of them. The street girl gets angry and calls the customer a pervert. She then exits the motel room, but the customer runs up to her and attacks her for calling him a pervert. This causes a disturbance in the motel, and Mr. Pimp rushes there to rescue the street girl. He slaps the customer and intimidates him into paying. He then goes to the street girl, who informs him that she is quitting being a prostitute. Mr. Pimp gives her a ride in the abandoned car the police saw earlier. The street girl is disturbed about the recent spate of disappearances in Mr. Pimp's brothel, and she berates him for not doing more to find the two missing girls. After all, Mr. Pimp used to be a detective, and he could still use his connections to search for answers. But he dismisses his concerns and says that the girls were either trafficked or they ran away with the cash advance that he gave them before meeting a customer. Mr. Pimp's assistant calls him because he doesn't have any more girls to send to a client. Mr. Pimp tells him to send the girl named Beauty instead, but apparently she's sick with a cold. Mr. Pimp thinks she's just pretending and could get off work, so he forces her to go attend to the client. In his office, Mr. Pimp realizes that the client whom Beauty is meeting that night was the same man who was the last client of his two missing girls. He quickly calls Beauty and tells her to text him the client's address when they go to his house. After giving his instructions to Beauty, he calls his fluffy old friend, who was in the police with him in the past, called Police Fluffy. Mr. Pimp tells him that he has a lead on the missing girls and asks him to send cops to the address. But Police Fluffy is currently assigned to be a part of the mayor's security detail, and shortly becomes busy dealing with the chaos after someone throws smelly shit at the mayor's face during demonstration. Meanwhile, the creepy client nicknamed Mr. Creepy meets Beauty, and they drive to his house in her car. On the way, they pass by the same alley where the car was abandoned. They arrive at his place, and she notices a freshly filled hole in the garden. She slinks away to the dirty bathroom to send Mr. Pimp the message. But there's no cellular service in the bathroom, so she couldn't send it. Beauty is increasingly unnerved and tries to open the window in the bathroom, but only to find a brick wall behind it. She then finds several clumps of long hair in the bathtub. She tells Mr. Creepy that she left something in her car, but he has already locked the gate. There is nowhere for her to run. On the other hand, Mr. Pimp only knows the client's district, so he goes there and waits for Beauty to contact him. But there's no word from her, and he can't contact her either. Back in the house, Mr. Creepy has tied Beauty up and reveals that he killed the two missing prostitutes. Then he knocks her out with a hammer to the head. But he is interrupted by an elderly couple looking for the real owner of the house. The owner is their church mate, and they are wondering why he hasn't been to the church lately. They see that the owner's dog is there and become suspicious of Mr. Creepy. Mr. Creepy kills the couple soon and gets in their car, so he can stash it somewhere. In a twist of fate, Mr. Pimp crashes his car into the vehicle Mr. Creepy is driving. He gets out and asks for Mr. Creepy's number, so he can pay for the damages. But he quickly notices the blood on Mr. Creepy's shirt. To confirm his suspicions, Mr. Pimp dials the client's number and Mr. Creepy's phone rings. He tries to escape and Mr. Pimp chases him through the streets. He corners him, and they get into a fast and furious scuffle. Local cops arrest the two and take them both to the station. Once in custody, Mr. Creepy lies about his cell phone and the car's owners. The cops press him for information about Mr. Pimp's prostitutes. However, Mr. Creepy easily confesses to killing 9 people. Meanwhile, Police Fluffy has apprehended the man who threw feces at the mayor. While driving him to the police station, Mr. Pimp calls him about Mr. Creepy's confession. He then surmises that Mr. Creepy is the killer, responsible for the several unsolved murder cases in the district. He heads to the police station and claims that he will bring Mr. Creepy in. But the local cops argue with him on what to do with the suspect. Eventually, Police Fluffy gets first dibs, so he orders Mr. Pimp to go to their station. While in the car with Police Fluffy and his partner, Mr. Creepy reveals that he killed his victims with a chisel and that Beauty is still alive. Mr. Pimp searches the car that Mr. Creepy stole and sees his keys lying on the floor. He orders his assistant to go around the district and find the house that the keys can open. He then visits the home of the elderly couple, who owns the car, and talks to their housekeeper, who hasn't seen them since earlier that day. He notices that the couple has a calendar from the local church. Mr. Creepy is taken to Police Fluffy's station to be fingerprinted and interrogated. He tells Police Fluffy that he hammers a chisel into his victims' heads, then hangs their bodies and chops them into pieces before burying them. But when asked about where he buried them, he becomes flippant. Mr. Pimp also goes to the station, but his priority is to find Beauty. He makes it clear that he doesn't believe that Mr. Creepy killed his girls, but Police Fluffy asserts that they need to at least get DNA samples of Beauty to compare to the blood on Mr. Creepy's shirt. Soon after, Mr. Pimp goes to Beauty's apartment with a DNA technician, and he finds Beauty's daughter there. Since she has no one else, Mr. Pimp takes her with him. He visits Mr. Creepy's sister and brother-in-law, but they claim that they haven't seen Mr. Creepy for years, ever since the sister left him alone with her son and came back in shock to see that Mr. Creepy had injured her son's head with a chisel. On the other hand, the interrogation continues, but Mr. Creepy still refuses to disclose where he buried the bodies. Without an address or location, there is insufficient evidence to build a case against Mr. Creepy. Furthermore, he was already arrested before in connection to a murder case, but was promptly released by the prosecutor because of the lack of evidence. The police chief then orders his squad to search the nearby mountain for the bodies, but after thorough searching, the police squad find no sign of any graves on the mountain. Mr. Pimp goes to a massage parlor that also supplies women to a male clientele. He forces the pimps there to check their records if Mr. Creepy had ever been a customer. The pimp there discloses that Mr. Creepy was a customer once, and the girl sent to him also disappeared. Mr. Pimp continues his search and meets a prostitute who had serviced Mr. Creepy before. She says that he is impotent and that he began to be obsessed with her after their night together. She adds that he has also sent her creepy pictures. Right then, the assistant finds a small room that can be opened by one of the keys. Mr. Pimp arrives there shortly after, but finds no trace of Beauty there. Instead, they find a man who is living there. It turns out that he's Mr. Creepy's former prison cellmate, and he stays in his apartment for a couple of weeks. Mr. Pimp also sees Mr. Creepy's religious drawings all over the walls. All are depicted in a horrible way. Beauty's daughter is left in the car, but she sees a woman who looks like her mother, so she follows her. However, she gets into an accident, and soon after, Mr. Pimp finds her and rushes her to the hospital. Back at the station, Mr. Creepy sits face to face with an official interrogator who insinuates that he is impotent. Mr. Creepy gets angry and attacks him. The police are running out of time. They need to find evidence soon, or else they'll have to release Mr. Creepy. The police chief now concentrates his resources on the district where Mr. Creepy was arrested. They are in desperate need of some good public relations buzz ever since the scandal after the mayor got attacked by smelly shit. Mr. Pimp arrives at the station and beats up Mr. Creepy to get the location of the bodies from him. The other cops let him do this, since they really need a lead. Luckily, Mr. Creepy gives them an address. But Mr. Pimp thinks that he gave them a fake location because it's too far from the alley where he parked the car. Meanwhile, the prosecutor sees Mr. Creepy's injuries and orders the police to release him from their custody and stop the ongoing search for evidence. He also demands that Mr. Pimp be arrested for assaulting Mr. Creepy. Mr. Pimp goes ballistic when he hears the news, and his former colleagues have to restrain him. While in the car, he sardonically reminisces about his time in the police force years ago. He teases the driver for profiting from shady deals just like he did, but Mr. Pimp was the only one who got fired. He then attacks the driver and causes the vehicle to crash. He escapes with the help of a sympathetic former colleague who gives him the key to his handcuffs. Elsewhere in a house, Beauty regains consciousness and manages to free herself from the bonds. The bodies of the elderly couple killed by Mr. Creepy are also in the bathroom. Bloody and disoriented, she escapes from the house and runs to a corner store. The store owner hides her and calls the police. Beauty also calls Mr. Pimp's phone, but he's too busy running through the city to answer. Mr. Creepy has been released from police custody, and he happens to stay in the same store where Beauty is hiding. The store owner informs him that the injured girl is there and asks him to stay in the store to protect them in case the killer comes, not knowing that Mr. Creepy is actually the killer. She gives him a hammer, which, however, he then uses to kill her, and then Beauty. A tired Mr. Pimp arrives at the district just in time to see the police cordoning off the crime scene. He becomes distraught when he finds out that Beauty has been killed. Mr. Creepy goes home and puts Beauty's severed head and hands in an aquarium. He then buries the elderly couple's bodies in the garden and kills the dog too. Mr. Pimp goes to the cellmate's room again and listens to Beauty's final voicemail for him. She had told him that she wanted to quit being a prostitute because the job is too scary. She had sobbed on the phone, and her anguish breaks Mr. Pimp. He then sees the same calendar from the local church and decides to visit it. He realizes that the religious imagery Mr. Creepy had drawn on the walls perfectly matched the stone carving of Jesus Christ on the church building. He steps inside and asks the deacon if he knows Mr. Creepy. The deacon replies that he is the assistant of a rich man who renovated the church. This is the same man who owns the house that Mr. Creepy now lives in, and the man whom the elderly couple had come to visit. Apparently, Mr. Creepy must have killed his former boss and occupied his house while doing his grisly crimes in the district. Mr. Pimp gets the address from the deacon, and he uses the keys he found in the car to open the gate. Right then, he stumbles into Mr. Creepy, and the two fall into a furious fight. They get severely injured, and Mr. Pimp gains the upper hand. He bludgeons Mr. Creepy with a hammer and is about to deal him a death blow when Police Fluffy and the other cops come barging into the house. Police Fluffy stops Mr. Pimp from killing Mr. Creepy just in time. Later on, one by one, the police dig up the bodies of all of Mr. Creepy's victims buried in the front yard of the house. Finally getting justice for Beauty and his other girls, the movie ends with a bloody Mr. Pimp visiting Beauty's daughter in the hospital and sitting down beside her. This is Daniel's CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.